Good morning, everyone. Class is in session, and today we are going to talk about the upcoming year. We are coming back from the most challenging school year in recent memory, and our first instinct might be to dive in and pick up where we left off before the pandemic. Here are 5 tips to consider when planning for this upcoming school year. Keep in mind, I'm not an expert. This is just what I'm thinking about before we get started. Let's dive right in. So tip number 1 is to have your big picture in mind. I actually started this at the end of last year. I am a very visual, spatial thinker, so I like to see charts and diagrams for when I need to solve problems. So I used one of the whiteboards in my classroom that I wasn't using for class, and I mapped out the school year for each grade and used backwards planning, which in essence means that I started with what I want my students to know at the end of the year for each grade, and then just kind of worked backwards. As an example, my learning targets for my third graders include 16th notes and all of the rhythms that are longer than that, as well as the full major scale using solfege. And then also the full spectrum of dynamics from pianissimo all the way to fortissimo. I also put where our school-wide music program is to account for class periods that we would need to focus on music for the program. We can talk about programming music in a different video. From there, I simply considered the scope and sequence of each skill that I wanted my students to know and understand. You may notice as you look at my chart, however, that there's still a lot of space, which actually leads me to my second tip. Don't overplan. Most of us probably didn't get to everything we really wanted to at the end of last year, and that's okay. We certainly didn't get to everything we wanted to the year before. Most of us basically stopped teaching the concepts in March. It may take a while to get your students back to where you would like, which means you need to put in plenty of buffer time between your units. The amount of time depends on the part of the year and the difficulty of the skill, but it might not be a bad idea to start with a buffer of 2 lessons between each new learning target and adjust from there. My third piece of advice is to take advantage of your manipulatives. If you're a music teacher, that means your instruments. Last year there were so many regulations on what we could do, what we couldn't do, what we could use, what we couldn't use, what we had to clean, all of that. And I'm expecting most of those regulations to go away this year, although a lot of them will probably stay. With all of those rules and regulations, at some points last year, I just wanted to throw my hands up in the air and give up using my instruments. If you're like me and you used your instruments sparingly last year, I'm guessing your students are like mine and are begging to use them this year. If your local health department gives you the okay, I highly suggest taking advantage of the instruments or other manipulatives that you have access to, even more so than you have in the past. I know they can be a pain sometimes to get out and go over the rules with, especially if you haven't used them since before COVID, but I promise it will be worth it. After all, our job is to make music. My fourth piece of advice is to use this time to find new, diverse repertoire. If you're like me and needed to just stick with the stuff you knew from last year, you were in survival mode, use this opportunity now to find music from other cultures. As somebody who's taught both the elementary and the secondary levels, I have realized that elementary students tend to be more interested in music from diverse backgrounds than middle school and high school students. But come concert time, my middle school and high school students would almost always favor the music that wasn't from the standard Western tradition. In fact, one year, the middle school track coach told me that his runners would sing the South African folk song Singa Bahamba Yo, which was one of the songs we were doing in class. They would do that while they were running, and they even taught it to their teammates who were not in choir. So not only do students enjoy music from other cultures, there's never anything wrong with learning how to be a more culturally responsive teacher as well. One of my favorite resources last year was the Musical Explorers series from Carnegie Hall. Their website included an interactive map that had artists from different parts of the world and their renditions of music from their traditions. I will link that website down in the description. My final tip for the beginning of the school year is the same one that I use for any new teacher, and that is to always meet your students where they are and not where you want them to be, especially if you're going into a new job, whether you're a veteran teacher or you're in your first year. Where you want your students to be might be even further away from where your students are now than ever before, because we've had not one, but 2 school years that were certainly less than ideal. Because of this, you may have to go back to teaching concepts to your 4th graders that they learned back in 2nd grade. Maybe you need to remind students who didn't take choir last year what a solfege scale sounds like. Maybe you need to reteach first position to a trombone player or teach paradiddles to sophomore percussionists. That's okay. As music teachers, one of the best parts of our job is that we have more flexibility with our curriculum than many other teachers of other subjects. That means that if we need to take a step back, we have much more leeway to do that with our students. After all, they're not robots. Are you a music teacher? Do you have any advice that I left out? Maybe you disagree entirely with my suggestions. That's okay. I never said that I was an expert. Comment down below and let me know your thoughts. While you're at it, go ahead and click like and subscribe to get more of my videos. Thank you for watching. Class is dismissed.